Hello you two. I am reading you today's 3 o'clock read out on the farm because my story is about 2 naughty goats, and behind me I have 2 naughty goats of my very own. This story is called Hazel and Clover's Great Escape, and it's written by Jill Dow. Angus loved Hazel and Clover, the 2 white goats that lived at Windy Edge Farm. He often talked to them and stroked their knobbly heads. His mother said he helped to keep them happy, and that was why they gave so much milk. But Hazel and Clover were a mischievous pair. They loved to wander all over the farm looking for tasty things to eat. Can you see this picture? Can you see what they're eating? How cheeky. At first, Mr. Finley tried to keep Hazel and Clover in the meadow, but they were always escaping. They could jump right over the fence, and they enjoyed chewing their way out of the hedge. Even prickly holly and hawthorn tasted good to them. They were clever too, and soon learnt to open all of the latches on the gates. Mr. Finley tried tethering Hazel and Clover in the middle of the field, but they had no shade from the sun and no shelter from the rain. What a miserable day! Mr. Finley tried tethering Hazel and Clover in the middle of the field, but they had no shade from the sun and no shelter from the rain. What a miserable day! So the next morning he tethered them near the shelter of the hedge, but they soon got into a terrible tangle. They grew very bad-tempered and decided to escape. Hazel chewed at Clover's rope and Clover chewed at Hazel's, till at last they broke free. Now for some fun! First they headed for the vegetable patch and were enjoying a feast when along the lane came Mr. Finley on the tractor, pulling a cart piled high with new mown hay. Delicious, thought the goats. They squeezed their way out through a gap in the hedge and trotted after the cart, pulling out strands of hay as it bumped slowly along. Suddenly the cart stopped and the farmer jumped down to open the gate. Now's our chance, thought the naughty pair, and they tugged and pulled at the ropes that held the hay in place. Mr. Finley started the tractor again, and as the cart jolted up the hill, the ropes worked themselves loose and the hay began to fall off. Soon there was a trail of hay all the way up the hill and round the corner. When Mr. Finley stopped at the next gate, he looked back and saw the hay. He wasn't very pleased. "That's strange," he said to himself, "but I suppose it's my own fault. I just can't have tied the ropes tightly enough." And he took off his jacket and set to work. Those goats, man. The goats were busy too. Just for fun, Hazel chewed through the old piece of rope that fastened the gate of the sheep's field, and Clover nudged it open. Didn't take long for the sheep to notice the open gate. First one left the field, then another, then another. Soon the whole flock was out on the lane, browsing through the grass verges. Just then Angus came along cycling. Angus jumped off his bike. "Dad!" he shouted. "Dad, the sheep are out!" His father came running down the hill, and together they drove all the sheep back into the field. 2 mishaps in one morning. Mr. Finley was beginning to get suspicious. "I wonder if those goats have managed to escape," he thought. "It's just the kind of mischief they'd get up to." Meanwhile, at the top of the hill, Hazel and Clover had found something very interesting in Mr. Finley's jacket pocket. Can you see what they've found? When all Mr. Finley's lunch was gone, the goat started to play with his jacket. Hazel seized one sleeve, Clover the other, and they began to tug. Each was determined not to let go. Rip! Mr. Findlay's old jacket split right down the middle. Mr. Findlay and Angus arrived just in time to see Hazel and Clover running off down the hill. "I knew it!" Mr. Findlay shouted after them. "It was you who untied the hay and let the sheep out." Then he found the tattered remains of his jacket. And no lunch! Mr. Findlay was angrier than ever. Angus set off quickly after the goats. "I'm starving," said Mr. Findlay at tea time. "Those goats ate all my lunch. They're making my life a misery. I don't know why we bother keeping them." "Here's why," said Mrs. Findlay, and she handed him a big plate of bread and butter and delicious goat's cheese. And that's the end. Now, I can promise that goats are indeed just as naughty as they are in that story. Look, you two, I just thought I'd show you. I finished filming the story, I went inside to get something, and I've come back out, and Myrtle is trying to munch on the book and on the picnic rug itself, which is very interesting in the camera pod too. Naughty goat.